Okay, Peter told me to start as soon as I possibly could. Okay. Yeah. Okay, trade will run out of time. So you told me. Okay. We're going to resume the previous panel. So, in many ways, the interruption. Let's get started. Do you want to say anything about the previous panel? All right. Okay. I'm Marsha Kinder. I'm from University of Southern California. And we're resuming the previous panel. We've had a brilliant speech in between that's really taken everything to another level. But in many ways, we're returning now to the context of talking about film and television. I'm an academic who came from film studies, and I'm now Associate Vice Provost for Research Advancement in Humanities at USC. So really what I want to do is to talk about some of the projects we've been doing at USC that have been using the visual and acoustic language of cinema for collaborations that reach across the arts, humanities, and sciences with an educational outreach at many different levels and with various degrees of openness. One of the things that I've been interested in doing is creating a series of events that bring attention to a series of 4 strategies that create transdisciplinary models of open digital scholarship and of teaching. And these 4 events try to put forth different kinds of interdisciplinary collaboration. One is the sensorium, which is the producing of new open source documentary that draw on the language, visual language and acoustic language that we normally associate with cinema, but really as modes of discovery. And this is being performed by people in history, people in the School of Policy and Planning, and also in the arts. But what it's producing is a series of documentaries that can become open software. A second is serious games. Serious games are being produced throughout the university. In the School of Engineering, there's several programs, really exciting programs, also in the School of Cinema Television, but also in the Annenberg School for Communication, also in language training, also in Slavic studies. So this is happening across the university. Visualizing science and the bringing together of various resources for this purpose, and trying to mobilize these resources for then educational outreach in K through 12, as well as more advanced levels. And finally, massive multimedia archives. We have just acquired the Shoah collection. We have a marvelous Dead Sea Scrolls collection, and we're developing new massive multimedia archives for this purpose as well. For example, one project that I've been involved with is trying to amass all the resources about Alzheimer's disease. And we've been talking to Peter Kaufman about also using this material to develop both television documentaries, but also installations that reach out to the public about it, also DVD-ROMs that could be in the schools, and of course also websites. Really what I want to do is to show how these 4 strategies have been combined in the Labyrinth Project, which is a research initiative on interactive narrative that I've been directing at USC's Annenberg Center since 1997. And we have 12 projects, but I'm only going to show a few excerpts, brief excerpts from 3, to show the development of different models of collaboration and different conceptions of open content. But I wanted to start by saying a few things a few points that really haven't been talked about so far. All of these projects draw on and build on archival data. In many ways, what we're doing is dramatizing the archive. But what we're trying to do is to build new models, reinventing education of things you couldn't do in regular forms without this kind of technology. And one of the things that's very important is the ways in which you contextualize the data, the archival data. The way that you're demonstrating that this archival data can be used for history, it can be used for fiction, and it's very much about what are the implications of the way that you've contextualized the material. Another thing that we're assuming also is we're very interested in networked public spaces. In other words, considering the internet as one of these spaces, but only one. There's also the museum, and not just the virtual museums, but real museums. There's also television broadcast. There's a lot of other public spaces that can be brought together in networks in, I think, interesting ways. And that's one of the things that we're really interested in dealing with. So I'm going to start out with a project that we started out by collaborating with individual independent filmmakers. And these are the kind of people whose works are not really interested in being protected by the major IP holders. It's an early project we did with independent filmmaker Pat O'Neill. And it's really what it is a digital city symphony on Los Angeles. One that focuses specifically on one building, the Ambassador Hotel, which was just demolished last week. So now this is the virtual record of it. Maybe we can have the sound a little lower. Yeah, just a little right in between, that's fine. But I think he's a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, who doesn't fit in the models that were discussed in yesterday's panel, where Henry's panel was talking about the cultural convergence, because he's not just he's not an amateur. He's not an amateur who's just seeking, a larger group. And he's not an amateur who's seeking a way into the main industry. Rather, he's an independent who really wants to challenge that industry. And that's one of the kinds of people that we wanted to partner with in producing these alternative models of what education could be. So let's just have a little bit. So we're moving in on the Hotel Ambassador. Okay. And this is seen as a repository of cultural images and sounds. In many ways, it's like an urban sensorium, where you're getting not only the images that have come through history and fiction, but also vintage radio, movie dialogue, music. And in picking a hotel as the point of focus, it's a space that combines public and private space. Just as in many ways, this is a project that combines public network space and private space. Could we have the lights down? So, we can't turn off the lights? There must be some way. Okay. So one of the things we do, we come in at random in the space, at random, and we can explore, we can just navigate the camera moves. So in many ways, this is a way of bringing together the language of cinema with database possibilities, database structures, and interactive possibilities of digital media. So we can go in exploring in this way. We can also move across to other spaces. And within this space, it's possible to call up the archival material.
What I think is quite clear is that we can work together in the last analysis, and that what has been going on within the United States over the period of the last 3 years, the divisions, the violence, the disenchantment with our society, the divisions, whether it's between blacks and whites, between the poor and the more affluent, or between age groups, or on the war in Vietnam, that we can start to work together. We are a great country.
So it's how this archival material is then really embedded in the space. And of course, this is the place where, in fact, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, which also, transformed in many ways the political atmosphere, and also, of course, the fate of this building as well. There's a very deliberate and blatant attempt to combine the fictional representation and the history, the actual footage, the documentary footage. And the notion is that this kind of combination is happening both in the physical space of this building, because this building was a site for many film noir films, as well as for this particular event. Now we can explore this space in that way that we've just gone through, but it also is possible to go to the
swimming pool,
to the actual architect's plans and go deliberately where you want to go. So it's a way of embedding a great deal of different kinds of material. And as we move through these various spaces, this is the Coconut Grove nightclub. If you click, you're able to call up these ghostly figures, all of whom are fictional, part of the fictional representations, or to make them disappear at any point. Or it's possible to bring up archival stills of this very room. You know, there are 6 stills of this kind. Also to look into the audience and pull up the archival footage. So it's a different kind of model.
Celebrities headed by Lawrence Melchior arrive for the 6th Imperial Ball.
Okay.
With her husband.
I'm trying to go fast because I know I don't have much time. It's also possible to go outside into the Wilshire Miracle Mile, and here we can see various clips of what this area looks like now. Okay, yeah. But I wanted to show you that it's possible to hear different theorists, different commentators contextualize the meaning of these images.
It's been totally transformed in terms of the economic and social structure of the city. And there are 2 main areas in which these changes have been focused. First is in the industrial structure of the city, and the second is in the ethnic or demographic structure of the city. When I came here in 1971, Los Angeles was still essentially an industrial city. There was a substantial amount of heavy industry. There was a strongly organized blue-collar working class. And after some very powerful union battles in the late 40s, the working class had achieved significant
We can have a very different view from Kevin Starr.
Years following World War I, the sentiment began to accrue in the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce circles that for Los Angeles to really emerge as an important American city, and especially to have an opportunity of bringing the 1932 Olympics into the city, and especially to serve
or an oral history of somebody who actually grew up in this building, so that you were able to do a different kind of combination, choosing your own commentary, the background, in this way.
Great place to grow up in. I had my own phone, conference calls on the weekends that the chief operator would set up with my girlfriends, and I had the run of the hotel and the swimming pool, the golf course, the tennis courts, the movie theater, the Coconut Grove. I was the horizontal Eloise because I lived on 23 acres rather than a 25-story Plaza Hotel.
And I mean, we certainly had, in this project, while Pat O'Neill was making the film, we were collaborating on the interactive version and brought in all the archival dimensions. So it was bringing this archival dimension. At the same time, we were able to get rights to his footage because we were really cooperating together. But we had to deal with certainly questions about rights. And part of it was, the newsreel material, which wasn't that difficult. And every time you go back, you get different images of even one
night in the Star Club, before a great many people,
hotspot.
Mr. Hoover talked very loud to me. He bawled me out, very loud. Among other things, he said, "You go back and tell your friends."
J. Edgar Hoover used to stay there every year. But then we had to deal with, say, images of Marilyn Monroe. Now, this particular image, we were not able to get the rights clearance because Marilyn Monroe's family required a high payment. So what we did was we blocked her out. Well, we still are talking about her, and we thought that this actually makes things, it draws even more attention to her. So in many ways, it was It was about, in many of these instances, it was trying to get around how to deal with these copyright issues. And I had to personally call Shirley Temple and persuade her that it was okay. Little Shirley was going to be okay in this context. It wasn't too dark. That was her. Really, that was her concern. So, but this project still it was released as a DVD-ROM, and sold, and it sells on Amazon.com. But its bigger life has really been as a museum installation that's been exhibited worldwide in Europe, Japan, Australia, China, Latin America. But as we moved on, we went to other kinds of projects, and one of the projects but we've retained this notion of the transmedia network, where we try to develop it across a lot of platforms and therefore have a lot of the same assets being used in different ways, mobilizing and trying to address different kinds of audience. We've done a lot of other projects. They're all shown here. One on Albert Einstein, that reached, was in the museums. We reached over 100,000 people coming to visit, Carol Parrott Blue and John Recchi and, other projects. But really the ones I want to show you brief excerpts from are ones that are also still in production. One is a online courseware project on Russian modernism. And this is going to be released free open source. But it has a different kind of, I think, collaboration model. I want to first just show you a little bit of it, and then talk about its model.
This course on Russian modernism and its international dimensions. A period when art was politically explosive.
All right, every time you come and you open this, you get a different image that's drawn from the basic database. It has an archive. So there are three main components of this. One is an archive. The second is a series of pathways, individual lectures by the participating faculty. And the faculty are not only from USC, but they're also from Berkeley. Olga Matic from the Slavic Language Department at Berkeley, and Yuri Sivian from the Slavic Language Department in Chicago. And we've been trying to gather also scholars really from all over the world. You come in, you click, it explodes. And it introduces the bomb motif with the explosiveness, which is something that's carried through on all the other levels as well. We then enter the material culture zone, and we've dealt with a number of these. I don't know which one you want to hear. Toilet? Okay, that's one of my favorites.
When, following London's lead, St. Petersburg and Moscow began to construct underground sewage systems at the end of the 19th century, the flush toilet and the attendant paraphernalia of the modern bathroom suddenly invaded the Russian home. Internal lead pipe plumbing, porcelain bowls, often highly decorated, and brass taps now facilitated the control of running water, so that by 1910 the solvent household could boast a chain-operated lavatory, toilet paper, and a bidet, as well as hot and cold showers. And perhaps the guttural neologisms of the futurist poets are but an echo of that newfound noise of flushed water.
Okay, now these were objects that were not invented in Russia, but it was what kind of inflection they took on in the specific Russian context. And we've created these, but as we have other people participating and using this in other courses, we're hoping that other students and other classes will add additional of these objects, and there'll be a toolkit for that purpose. Over this, we now go to our main menu space, which we've made into GOOM, the GOOM Arcade, which is still standing in Moscow. And over here, we're going to have a voiceover that distinguishes between modernity and modernism. And then here are some of the lectures we have so far. Velocity by John Bolt, and also Nothingness. And in his lecture on Nothingness, what students are able to do, they're able to go to the archives and actually select images, paintings, etc., where they're going to curate a show online, and then write the text, write the catalog, and the other students can review it. I'm not going to go into this too much, though, because of time. I only have 6 minutes. I want to show something else. But I am going to show you just a slide, slideshow, which introduces the game, because another very important part of this is a role-playing game montage. And we picked this moment of World Expo in 1896 because we're giving the visions, the various visions of the future. And the various pathways here are the possibility of pursuing avant-garde art, artistic experimentation, radical politics, and technological innovation, and some kind of combination of those three. These are all images that are in the archives and that we're using. And we now have a playable prototype. The collaboration at USC has involved the game pipe, which is from the School of Engineering. And with their students, computer science students, we've developed a playable prototype, which is a mod of Half-Life 2. And we've also been working with the animation students from cinema, the Slavic Studies, graduate students from Slavic Studies as well. Yes, and we decided to focus again with the emphasis on cinema. This was the moment when cinema was first introduced into Russia, and Maxim Gorky just happened to be there and write his very famous essays about this. So it's that moment we were interested in dramatizing, and I'm just going to show you about 1 minute of a linear little introduction of what it looks like, which might give you a little bit of an idea. But montage, it was very important that was the conception.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you'll see before you in this little box will change the world. Please, Monsieur Gendarme, stay in your seats. It is not a time bomb. The ticking noise you hear is the sound of progress. The progress of one picture after another. The progress of science. The progress of life itself. Ladies and gentlemen, voila, la cinématographe.
These, of course, are the actual Lumiere, one of the Lumiere films. And this is our avatar. We only have one avatar in the prototype thus far. We're going for the playful. Okay, well, that's all I want to show you, just as a bit of a sample here. But this is a model of collaboration that then is creating a customized consortium with a number of schools who are interested in this particular content. And the reason why we chose this content is that these aesthetic principles, constructivism, intertextuality, dialectic, montage, synesthesia, they're really aesthetic principles that are crucial for the expansion of digital art forms, it seemed to us. And that was good to understand the historical roots of that. And we think that this model with these three components can be adapted to other software. The other project that we're developing in terms of getting the team together is on Pacific Island culture. The third project I just want to show you very briefly is one on, it's one of our science projects that's dealing with neuroscience. And this is a project where we're working with a neurobiologist, Jean Chen-Chi from the School of Pharmacy, and it's called A Tale of Two Maos, and it's about monoamine oxidase, A and B, the two enzymes that regulate dopamine and serotonin, and thereby control moods and aggression. It's now in production, and it's going to be offered as free open software. And we're working with the LA School District in a program to train high school science teachers how to use it in the classes. And we also have a cooperation with both Beijing and Taiwan on doing Chinese versions. So that's why, in many ways, we don't have some of the definitions in. But this will be moving, and you'll be able to decide where one enters. These are the list of topics we're doing, and there will be a glossary that will be both verbal and visual. These are some of the topics that we have. And then when we get to movies, we can actually go in and have the animations. It will be possible to stop at any point and have this described, but as I said, we don't have the description because we're doing the Chinese translations too. Those are decisions that have to be made. I'll try to go fast here. But it's also in terms of being able to stop at any point, get a description, and then you'll be able to hook into the glossary at any point too with the voiceovers. Okay, I want to show you one more thing, because this is Dr. Shi, and we think that this is going to be a very popular point of entry when you see the impact of what happens when you deprive mice of the MAOA gene.
If you put them together, they will fight. So because they are lack of the enzyme monoamine oxidase, A form, and when this enzyme is not there, the brain serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine level all increased significantly. And then we don't know what are the biochemical event after that, but the behavior is aggression. With these mice, aggression only is one of the behavior we see. Right now, we're also studying how the blood pressure altered, and also we are studying how learning and memory are changed in these mice.
We have other sections which are going to show how, and then when you inject the mice with the MAOA, how they then are no longer violent. But this notion of dealing with the bioethics, the issues about nature versus culture, we're very interested in also interviews with a number of different scientists who are working in this area and showing both how they became scientists and what kind of discoveries they made. Because one of the goals is to try to help to get students interested in studying science and seeing it as very exciting. So I think that's where I'll stop there since... I think I'll stop there, yes. So those are some of the models that we're doing, and we're hoping to do something similar with the Alzheimer's. And that's a project that's called Tangles, unraveling the biological and cultural enigmas of Alzheimer's disease, because it's a disease that is really going to be increasing tremendously over the next 20 years. It's 50% chance of having Alzheimer's when one reaches the age of 80. It takes 20 years to lead into this, and now that the baby boomers are just hitting this age, there's going to be a dramatic increase, and there's a real need for more public information. And this is a project we hope to have, television documentaries and an installation, and other projects. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Victor Edmonds from Educational Technology Services at University of California, Berkeley. And what I'm going to do today is show you a different way of putting together organizationally and how we built this open concept into the way we were doing our normal business, so that it was very sustainable and scalable, and really there's been no extra budget, for the whole open aspect of what we've been doing here. Or the organizational structure has a whole lot to do with it. And I want to start off with just giving you a rough idea. The Educational Technology Services came from a bunch of things in the university. It was put together in reference to a faculty panel that wanted to have one-stop shopping for their support. And we were at one point Educational Technology Television Services, and so we have a large TV studio and a radio station. Part of us was media services, so we have facilities all over campus. We provide a core need for the campus that campus is willing to support on a regular basis, and we have some of our own income from offering the kinds of services that these gentlemen are offering in the back. Part of this came from the Instructional Technology Program, which is a group that innovated with faculty using technology in teaching. Fred Bashirs, who's here, was a member of that program and came to us when we took in that program. And we took in parts of the Berkeley Multimedia Research Center. And by forming an organization out of all these things, we have the kind of flexibility and the space to do the kinds of things we need to do. So now we're divided into sort of three groups. One is what we call Learning Systems Group, which is which runs what we call BSpace, which is our course management system. BSpace is an application of Sakai, an instance of Sakai. And you can't read the full logo because it was not made for this smallest showing, but it's BSpace, which is Berkeley Space, Connect, Learn, Collaborate. Then we have Learning Spaces, which we run the AV thing, we run classroom technology and special support and event support, and we also do the design and engineering of facilities around campus, so we're able to build all the facilities around campus to fit into what we're doing also. And thirdly, we have webcast, video conferencing, video services, and a radio station. And this aspect of us is what we're going to go into mostly today in terms of our webcast situation. I just want to mention quickly the values of our organization, because you'll see how the organization is built on the very values that relate so well to the values that we've been talking about these last couple days. First of all, we're built on major impact, focus on results. We don't do things that are specifically for one or the other course. Everything has to be scalable and sustainable. Everything has to be driven by studied data about real needs. In terms of innovation and creativity, we specify those very much toward it's got to be effective innovation, useful creativity. And two parts of our mission statement relate right to the parts of the mission statement of the university. And that gives us a lot of the power to move into this open area. And that is that from the university mission statement, two parts we think are kind of ours are enriching the human experience and the global dissemination of knowledge. We have certain principles that we've decided to build our video process on, and you'll see in there ubiquity, flexibility, access, interaction, and central integration. The economics of the operation are that we provide these core services, and so we have a lot of core funding. We have varied stakeholders so that we have a broad base of financial and moral support. The teaching faculty see us as essential to their mission. Research groups we're now providing through Sakai, software that helps research groups in their collaboration. Students are very much behind us. In fact, students even now have a fund where students are voluntarily funding parts of webcast.berkeley. We're natural for the alumni, administrative groups. We provide a lot of services for them, and we're very much aligned with public affairs, who sees the global dissemination of knowledge as part of their mission also, so they're very supportive of us. Our funding sources are core funding, provost temporary funds, recharge, which is internal money, and income, which is money we make from outside the university. No grant foundations, grants from foundations to this point, although we're hoping to end that maybe starting today. We've been working on this kind of do now, fund later model, and that is that we have enough money flowing through our organization that we can pilot programs. We can show the university what a program will be, and then go for the funding. And the provost's office has been very glad to see that, because we are able to do something for about a year and then show enough results that the provost will want to continue it. The main emphasis today is on webcast.berkeley. If you Google webcast, we'll come up third. And so we have a lot of action on webcast. Webcast goes way back at Berkeley. Berkeley Multimedia Research Center was one of the groups that invented a lot of the basic technology that went into using video on the web. And at a given point, they were offering a lot of lectures for courses. And at a given point, the campus came to depend on these lectures. Students came to depend on these webcast lectures. And it became problematic having that in a research group whose website may or may not be up to date, depending on what research they're trying out with it and so forth. So the webcast services were moved over to educational technology services when we began and became part of what we did. Under us, it has gone from being a kind of an experimental thing to being, we're kind of thinking of this year as we're definitely out of the experimental phase now, and we start looking at the numbers we're getting. So right now, each semester we stream and video on demand the lectures for 17 to 25 courses. Plus we keep up the courses from the past, of course. In 2005, we had 674,000, basically, views by our students. Now, a view is, they have to stay for a minute before they get counted in the way we're counting. And so they say, basically, to convert views to hits, you have to multiply views by 8. So you see, if you took that number and multiplied it by 8, you'd have an astronomical number of hits, which, if you compare it to how other people count. We find that our students use these videos to review and to take notes. A lot of students are saying now they can sit in class and just pay attention to what's going on and then use the video to take notes later. And we're seeing a big emphasis in our students in watching not only how today's prof's teaching it in class and then in video, but then going back and seeing how it was taught last semester or the semester before, or kind of a greatest hits. One of the biology departments has invented a kind of greatest hits of the best lectures on all the main topics in biology. Then there's the class attendance issue. This is what the press always wants to talk about. I think we were just in the LA Times, and all they talked about, how this whole thing was class attendance. They're always afraid people might not attend class. Our faculty have dealt with that issue in some very intelligent ways. When some faculty member put that out about what it's supposed to be, won't attend class, some other faculty members came back with, well, if they're not getting any added value from being at your class, they're getting just as much on video, they're just being smart about it. And when this came up in the Chancellor's conference room before, I was asked this question, well, won't this hurt class attendance? Before I got a chance to answer, one of the deans said, this is a challenge to faculty to use their class time well. Because if they don't use their class time well and there's no reason to really come and interact in class, then they're better off watching it on video. So I just want to mention, some of you, I'm sure, are fans of the Ironic Times, which comes out online once a week. It came out yesterday, and here's one of the items they had yesterday. They tend to have like a headline and then a sub-headline. That's kind of the way the whole thing works. Here's one of the items they had yesterday. Online lectures, podcasts enable college students to skip most classes. But physically attending college is still important for sports parties, drinking, and sex. We opened up after webcast became pretty popular. We opened up webcast events, in which we now cover about 100 of the top events. We don't do things like graduation. We do like intellectual events because it's supposed to be resources. We had about 100 a year. It became self-supporting after a year. We did it for free for a year and told everyone that sponsors all these lecture series that they should put it into next year's budget, and told them to be about $500 to $700 in next year's budget. And so absolutely everyone did. So pretty much every lecture on campus now shows up on webcast. And we had 98,000 views last semester. Lots of people around the country are discovering this is very good entertainment evening, too, rather than Friends or something. You're one of our viewers? Okay, great. Yeah, the Friedman thing. Yeah, actually the Friedman thing's pretty interesting, but we were a little disappointed. We had Friedman and Maureen Dowd together, and we thought this was going to be our best ever. And it's good, but it's not, not our best ever. Here's the kind of astonishing thing, that we look at our total views, and we come out with over 4 million last year. And so we started saying, oh, my God. We actually know some of the reasons, which we discovered a couple of years before that. One of the reasons is last year China was 1,700,000 views, which means that would be in the neighborhood of, 10 million hits. So we're getting people from all over. We've never advertised this. You've probably never heard of this before, right? And except some people who have discovered it. And it's not... We've never usually put things out that way. And a lot of times with our events, we get the right clearances from the speakers and everything. But on our course things, we really haven't looked at this as a totally scrubbed sort of thing that like like MIT's OpenCourseWare, and yet we're picking up this tremendous growth in viewers. Another interesting thing is look how big the viewers, how many viewers for everything that was a year old. These numbers are for 2005. So the year-old things are very popular. And an interesting thing too is how little is watched live. And so we do live streaming, but we're finding less and less that that's not, it's not that big a deal. It's not worth the trouble if it's a little easier to do the other way. And we're turning out 80 hours of fresh video a week, which puts us as, I know the documentary filmmakers in the house can say, well, a little, but not more than you are. But of course we're doing it not by emphasizing the kinds of quality, but what we find is what people want is quantity. This is what we're doing. Of course, there's no winter semester at Berkeley, so this is what we're doing this semester, just to give you an idea of what we cover. It tends to be pretty broadly covered across the various disciplines. 26 and 30 doesn't add up to 38 because there's 18 that are doing, 18 courses are available both on webcast and on podcast. We are one of the, in fact, we've had one of the seats on the Sakai board, and we are very active Sakai developers. We have a large group in our group that develops Sakai software. And right now we're working on, we've done the grade book, and we're doing now sectioning. And a lot of those things that's necessary to make Sakai just work at a lot of different schools. Our next big Sakai project we're looking at, although it's getting a little farther away as this whole sectioning problem is beginning to be a bigger problem on the inside of Sakai, that we're going to be working on video tools. And so basically, just quickly to show you a statement of the problem we're looking at in terms of video tools for Sakai, is that the content students use is increasingly on video and audio and stills. And students don't approach this stuff. And they don't know how to approach this stuff as study materials. They tend to be pretty passive. They watch a video like a television show and listen to the audio as a radio show. So what we've been doing a study to see what we need to do to help them use these videos more effectively. We did a bunch of student surveys last spring in which we found out bookmarking was essential. We do these videos, by the way, as real files, so you can go through them. But if you've ever gone back and forth in a real file, it's really, it's like writing with the gloves on or something. So bookmarking, being able to get to certain plays, downloading onto their iPods and so forth, which we're working on. Searchable captions, chaptering, and PowerPoint sync are the features that they like the best about what we have. Annotation, which we thought they would like a lot, is not. They don't really have been asking that much. And we couldn't get them very interested in knowledge-sharing tools, which kind of surprised us a bit. We think that they'll get interested in that once they get these easier things that they need first, I think once it gets a little more sophisticated. And we're doing a user interaction study now in which we watch people using webcasts, which is kind of interesting. Some of the notes, I don't actually do any of the interviews, but I see the notes, and they talk about the student was eating, fidgeting, watching this, doing this, watching something else on the side. So we get the whole thing of what they're doing, but they spend a lot of time finding specific content, returning to specific content, taking notes, taking time code and other difficult ways really of being able to return to a spot. And bunches of stuff that you can see here. And the things that they need the best are better shot selection and so forth. Now, let me get the next section here is just to give you an idea of some of the directions we're going in on these issues. First of all, we're going to the issue of quantity. And as I mentioned before, we talk about quality video. Our video isn't so much quality as video as it is quality lectures. The content's what the quality is. And as we look at our users, we find out they just want more. They say, no, don't worry about it. Don't spend your money on getting them higher quality. Spend your money on getting more of them. So we're right now, it costs us about $4,000 a course. It's for the whole semester to do this. And that's really counting all the costs, counting a little piece of my pay, everything, And so we're working on we have some good methods. We're working on automation of the origination of the video. And we're trying to add more and more built-in facilities. The facilities we have everything built into, of course, are much less expensive to operate. We charge departments $2,000 to do this. We're trying to eliminate that charge. We want to eliminate the number and diversity of courses. And we've got some good projects going about increasing the modes of distribution. The quality issues we're going after are, first of all, shot selection is the biggest thing that everyone's concerned with. And that is basically when you're watching this lecture, you're watching the prof, you'd rather be watching the PowerPoint, or you're watching the board and you'd rather be watching the PowerPoint. Those kind of selections. And we've got some really interesting kind of wisdom of crowd technology sort of things to solve that problem that we're working on now. Production values in terms of switching and lighting. We have a big captioning program that we've pretty well completed now. We found out how to do some very interesting captioning that costs us, especially if we have a hard of hearing student in the class. It's actually now going through this whole process and captioning it and making it available for anyone who wants to use the caption course, which is pretty much everybody because it allows you to search. We found out we can do that for about what it costs to send a signer into the room. So we've solved a problem there, but we're working with some vendors about trying to get that price down yet. By the way, the universal access not only makes it available for the deaf students, but then when you've got text captioned and synced, which costs just as much as the captioning, then anyone can search by concept your videos, and that's when the videos start getting really valuable. And we're working on format issues, archiving, flexibility of formats. This is an expensive item here to have things really work for the future and have them work in a number of ways now. And we're going to be adding, right now we're just doing all reel. We're going to be having lots of different formats, and of course this next year. In Sakai, we want a video more. You can kind of already, kind of kludgely put your videos in your Sakai site. But we're integrating that more thoroughly. We're introducing the option to hide behind authentication, which we don't have now. So that's by the way, kept us from having courses that have music in them or a whole lot of visuals or those kind of courses. We haven't been able to put on because we haven't been able to get all those kind of permissions. So now we'll be able to hide them behind authentication within Sakai. And of course, we're doing that tool in such a way that everyone will be able to use it. And the whole bookmark dog ear tool is a big project that we have going on as sort of the first step toward interactive use of television for studying. And we're going to be continuing this user interaction study. Another concept that we're working on is an idea we call the Berkeley Explainer. When we look through the riches of what we have in webcast.berkeley, we have definitions in there of all the major academic terms. For example, the black hole is really well defined by Filipenko, who's one of the best astronomers in the world, and he defines a black hole in a really succinct way. We have loads of concepts like that. What do the frontal lobes really do by Marion Diamond, who's a legendary figure in brain study. And we have all these things in there. And what we've been thinking with this is what we have the makings of here is a kind of explainer, a kind of a dictionary that will be a very good use of video, because a verbal-only dictionary lacks those kind of things that explaining can do, where you have a person who's giving you an attitude toward it and a whole tone to it. We thought it was one really good use of video. So we're putting together this project and looking for trying to create this kind of definitive, reliable, for students everywhere, dictionary of basic terms. And then beyond all this, we have a whole menu of things we want to do with video and Sakai that'll lead to really a kind of interactive television that we think can be used in lots of ways by. And of course, the whole Sakai notion is that it's open source and can be used by lots of people in lots of ways. We want to integrate video conferencing into Sakai, which is an area of our expertise. We have the goal on our classrooms, which we're doing in terms of the fact that we build the classrooms. We control 240 of them, and we build for the others, that every classroom will be webcast, podcast, and video conference ready and IP controlled. And we have the goal, which we know we'll never achieve 100% because not every prof will want it, but basically the goal to have the infrastructure to webcast every lecture, which we know is going to mean there's going to be less lecturing on campus with all the video there and more interactive in the classrooms. And we see this going down to someday when people are going to be pulling up, sitting in front of the TV at night, and what they want to watch is something at Berkeley or other university, watching one of the more recent lectures than the programs. And we see that's happening as with the convergence. And so we want to become and contribute to the whole idea of intelligent TV for the home viewer. So that's what's going on now at the Educational Technology Services at UC Berkeley.
It's Jeff Ubois. I want to just start by kind of recapping the obvious. Television's in transition right now from tape to disc and from RF to IP for distribution. The formats are changing. The FCC is planning on getting broadcasters to go digital in 2009 after the Final Four. Viewers are changing their patterns, going from scheduled to unscheduled and from long-form to short-form video. People are watching things not just on the tube, but on the PC and on the cell phone and on the projector. And if you're sort of hopeful, it looks like television or video is moving from being a unidirectional broadcast medium into something that's more like a social medium, and from something that is ephemeral to something that is maybe a little more permanent. There's been a lot of mention of the word counterintuitive during this conference, and I think that's a really good word to describe not only what's happening with open content, but what's happening with video as well. My intuitions about media have been formed largely from print and working in the print media. And so when I started looking at television, I was really taken aback by a bunch of things. And they're kind of summed up in a short clip I want to play because I get more out of it every time I watch it. Let's see if that'll go. Oh, we're not getting sound.
Be well confirmed. Okay. I think that is...
I'm going to try that one more time and feed the microphone right into the... Oh, is this...
You have said in the past that it was, quote, pretty well confirmed.
No, I never said that.
Okay. I
never
think
said
that is...
No, absolutely not.
He absolutely never said that.
It's been pretty well confirmed that he did get a crowd and he did meet with a senior official of the Iraqi intelligence service in Czechoslovakia last April.
Now, that's really an exception for television, if you think about it. I mean, that level of access is very unusual. It wouldn't be so unusual in print, but in this case, The Daily Show was able to find the footage. They were willing to risk showing it. I got it off the internet. I didn't get it off the television. A blogger made it available. So it's, in a sense, a quote of a quote of a quote. And all of this would have been fine in print, but it's a lot less clear for television. So there's kind of a question about access to this material. What kinds of effects are we going to see as television, and particularly television news, becomes more referenceable this way? So I would argue that right now closed is the norm, that broadcasts are not always preserved. Preservation is not always reliable. Preserved broadcasts are certainly not always accessible. The accessible broadcasts can't always be reused, even in classrooms. And so there's kind of a question of how bad is it. And I spent some time last year. I got funded by the Cale Austin Foundation to take a look, and to take a look at a particular case, which was an instance involving Murphy Brown and Dan Quayle. So this was an argument that took place between a fictional television character and the vice president. And I don't know if you all remember that, but I'll play the
unwed mother, Murphy Brown, of the popular TV sitcom of the same name. On this week's episode, TV newscaster Brown, who's played by Candice Bergen, gave birth. Some of her friends were present, but the father was nowhere in sight.
It doesn't help matters when primetime TV has Murphy Brown, a character who supposedly epitomizes today's intelligent, highly paid professional woman, mocking the importance of fathers by bearing a child alone and calling it just another lifestyle choice.
So that actually turned into quite a big story. It led the news the next day.
Good evening, Dan Rather reporting. The Bush-Quayle re-election campaign appeared to be in disarray today over the fray created by Vice President Quayle's carefully orchestrated attack on the Murphy Brown TV show. The Vice President insisted again today that the fictional character Murphy Brown's fictional single motherhood promoted bad values. He originally said it in the context of what has happened in Los Angeles. President Bush first seemed to agree, then suddenly disagreed, and then began distancing himself. Bill Leggett.
So that goes on, and there's other footage like that. I think my favorite was the disagreement over abortion that got wrapped into this. Of here's someone who's doing what you say we should do, and now you're giving her a hard time. But clearly this was an important debate. It was a public debate about morality. It's the kind of thing that would be useful to reconstruct for a whole bunch of different educational contexts, ranging from journalism to history. And the footage where you have to go to get it if you want to reconstruct it from primary sources is in a whole bunch of different places that are held under different intellectual property regimes. So you have public comments by the vice president, you have news footage, and you have entertainment footage. So I went looking to try and see how much of this could be reconstructed, and I'm sure you'll be shocked to know that it was really hard to do. In fact, there's no single source or union catalog that you can go to try and find out what's been broadcast on television. I found reference to over 900 clips. Of those, under 100 were easily available. And I got some interesting denials of access when I got answers at all. I wrote to a number of broadcasters and program owners, and when I did that, I got some responses that you wouldn't expect. So the first was the original footage that I showed there of Dan Quayle was a speech at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. And when I started this project, I went to the Commonwealth Club website, and they said, if you want to order the Dan Quayle tape, you can do that. So I filled out the little form to do it, and I got a note back saying, well, we're sorry, we've transferred this footage to the Hoover Institution at Stanford. So I wrote to them, and I said, well, can I get a copy of this vice presidential speech? And the note that I got back from Hoover was, no, we'd like to do that, but not only have we not yet digitized it, but in fact we couldn't give it to you anyway because of copyright concerns. So here's a speech by the vice president in a public location that is unavailable to somebody who's working at a university due to copyright concerns. Warner Brothers, during the course of this project, started releasing Murphy Brown on DVD, but was unwilling to grant any rights for showing this in a classroom setting. NBC was happy to grant rights, but they wanted $20 a second with a 30-second minimum. So I think you can see that reconstruction from primary sources of an event like this is difficult for a lot of reasons. I could go into more detail about it, but in the interest of time, I just want to kind of move along. That kind of inaccessibility is typical. There's been a lot of mention of eyes on the prize. I think there are people in the room who know more about this than I do and maybe could correct me, but the rumored number that I heard was that there was a $60,000 study to figure out what rights needed to be purchased, and then $850,000 was needed to buy back the rights. And we heard today that even that's not enough to get back into a distribution of videotape kind of a mode. So research is hard to conduct in an environment that's chilled that way. I had some back and forth about publishing the results of this, and one of the editors that I spoke to at a publication insisted that the notes that I had received and traded with Hoover and other institutions were in fact copyrighted themselves. So it wouldn't be possible to publish the results of my interactions with these people because it was their belief and the belief of their general counsel that that email was covered by copyright. I actually got an opinion from people at Bolt and the Samuelson Clinic to the effect that that wasn't true, but it didn't change the opinions of the people at a particular publication. So there's a big gap between where we are and where I think we could be. I think that it would be possible, in principle at least, to save everything that is broadcast. Right now there's an organization called the TV Archive that's recording 20 news stations from around the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in DV quality for about $20,000 per station per year. The How Much Information study at UC Berkeley says that there are 21,000 television stations in the world broadcasting about 31 million hours a year, and that would take 45 to 90 petabytes of storage. Now, if you do the math, it looks like a pretty big number, and it is, but it's not beyond maybe our society's ability to pay for it if you think that libraries worldwide have a $31 billion budget. I think one of the reasons why we haven't moved on this is that it's just not internalized everywhere, that the price of storage is dropping as fast as it is. There was a report on the state of video archiving done at the Library of Congress in 1997, and it laid out exactly what all the issues were related to television preservation and came up with a number of great recommendations which have, for the most part, not been implemented. But the biggest change since that 1997 report is that the price of storage has dropped by about 98%. So even what is captured is not necessarily preserved in an effective way. I have not, at least, seen a study of U.S. archives, but there was a project in Europe called PrestoSpace that looked at how television was being preserved in European archives. And the conclusion from that report was that at current rates of preservation work, 40% of existing material in archives, material that's already been captured and put to tape, will disappear by 2045. And that, as you can see, is a best case figure. At worst, 70% of existing material will simply be gone in 20 years. So I'm kind of mystified by this. I don't know why this is. I think that there are a bunch of reasons that we've talked about over the course of this conference. One is that footage is, in a sense, priceless. When I went out and spoke to archives, there were two reactions that I got. One was, well, we don't make much money from running our archive. We don't want to invest a lot of money in providing services out of our archive. We're not making any money from it. And at the same time, there was a sense of, oh my God, this footage that we have is precious and it may be worth a great deal of money, and we wouldn't want to loosen the rights and forego future earnings. So it's very hard to estimate what the future value of material is. I went back and found some Ford Foundation figures that $289 million had been invested in PBS programming. Now, some of that's operations, some of that's programming, between 1951 and 1976. I have no idea what that footage is worth now, but it's really interesting to think what kind of investment might be required to buy back the rights and make it publicly available. There are also, I think, legal risks that we've heard about throughout the course of this meeting. We don't know really what we can record and what we can migrate from one type of storage system to another. We don't know what a licensable event is. This is a question from Rick Prelinger, and he uses that as a clarifying question. What's a licensable event? And the answer is we don't really know. We don't really know what fair use is. We don't know when we need to get a license if we want to reuse a particular clip or bit of material. And without having a sense of what that might be, it's very difficult to make any sort of decision. Another interesting legal question that has been passed around is, are streams loans, especially for news? So the Vanderbilt clause says that libraries can make a limited number of copies available for loan for a limited period of time. It's unclear how that relates to DRM. It's unclear how that relates to streams. But it would be very interesting if someone decided that they wanted to set up a library that loaned material with streams. And then finally, there's this issue of how do we simplify the clearance process. And I think John Walensky's suggestion that we use access as a path-straightening value in looking at legal issues is a really useful framework. There are also issues in provenance and attribution that are largely unresolved. So, for example, after the 9/11 event, there was footage broadcast on CNN of Palestinians dancing. And there was a big controversy about whether this was new footage or old footage. And it appears that it turns out that that was, in fact, contemporaneous footage. It was accurate. But there was no mechanism for people to know and go back and check at the provenance of the material that had been broadcast at that time. So it makes it harder to have a credible news source if you can't go back and see what's been broadcast when, if there's no system of attribution. And that's going to get worse as video is remixed. So I don't really know how those clips of Vice President Cheney were put together. There's no easy way to go back and see where those actually came from or who made it or who owns the license. And that also is an issue when you start thinking about video news releases. There was kind of a kerfuffle earlier last year about the Bush administration's practice of creating video news releases that looked like they had been put together by news broadcasters. Well, again, without any kind of system for provenance or attribution, we don't know what we're imbibing. There's no nutritional labeling for news footage. There were hearings on that. There was something called the Truth in Broadcasting Act. I wrote to the committee there and kind of said, well, could we have an archive? They were pushing to have a label on the VNRs that were produced by the government. And Senator Kerry asked the FCC representative if it would be possible to have an archive, and he said yes, but that bill died. So if someone were in a position to start recording VNRs, I think that they would quickly get a very interesting collection of material that might inform future scholars in the way some of the ephemeral films have today. One last point about provenance and attribution, which is DRM is being used for a bunch of different reasons. One of them is that people want to be able to track rights and have some system of payment. And it's interesting to think about distinguishing between a system of attribution and provenance and DRM. So if we can find ways where attribution might replace strong DRM, there might be less of a conflict between people in archives who are worried about losing access to material as DRM systems expire or break, and the desire of archivists and others to keep a straight chain of custody and provenance. So all these are social choices. What we do with television is largely a social choice. The Digital Future report that just came out pointed out that in Britain, about $83 per capita is spent on public broadcasting. In the U.S., it's $1.49. And these social issues are going to get worked through by communities of interest, whether those are trade associations in Washington or people in this room or fans and amateurs that are working to blur the distinction between users and creators. I think that a lot of the conflict that happens right now is because people don't know whether to identify as users or creators or how to think about other groups of people as users or creators. And then finally, open production models, which Peter will be talking about, are likely not only to change the way things are put together, but to change the way they're accessed in the future. I want to just close with a note from Billington, James Billington, who's a Librarian of Congress. He wrote this in 1987 as a forward to the report I mentioned earlier, and that is still true. I would argue that it's not acceptable, especially given the conclusion offered by Eric Blair, who's also known as George Orwell. Who controls the past controls the future. So thank you very much. I'm going to forego this one last broadcast in the interest of time and close the panel. So thank you.
Questions for our panelists, also for our panelists from Columbia, and a question from our panelists from Columbia for this part of the panel.
Marsha, first, the Labyrinth stuff looks terrific. It's been nice to watch it from its beginning to see it now. I had two questions. One related to pedagogy, and the other more technology. Is there, in the specifications when you build these things, or are there other organizations that actually keep track or monitor or evaluate how these projects are changing the classroom? Are they in fact transformative? And then the second thing I want to ask about, I think it's really interesting where these projects come out of, like repurposing archives in some way, making them purposeful. Is there some sort of plan, or are you starting to think about archiving these projects themselves so that in 50 years, if I find the DVD-ROM, I don't have to spend hundreds of dollars in order just to view it? Is that something you're thinking about, upgrading?
Absolutely. Well, good questions. The two projects I showed, the Russian Modernism and the Tale of Two Mouths, they're both still in production. We're building in an evaluation program for them. So that's going to be part, particularly with the LA Unified, in that whole system of how they're going to be dealt with the high school science teachers. And we're interested in the way in which the various medium, in other words, how it works as online, how it works in the museum installation, how it works on the DVD-ROM, and at different levels. So that's definitely part of the design project, though I didn't show that. The Russian Modernism, that's also going to be, because we're really releasing it, you might say, this summer. So that's going to be something that will be information, and we're going to be gathering that kind of information. We have thus far used it at Berkeley. Well, Olga Matic has used it at Berkeley, and Yuri Sivian has used it at the University of Chicago. But that's more anecdotal, the kind of impact. But in fact, for Olga Matic, because she developed the pathway on Petersburg, And so it's totally transformed, in fact, her own research interest. And in fact, her students now are involved in mapping Petersburg. It's both something about the novel, but also about Petersburg during that period. So it really has had a very great impact on the class that she was using it in. But we're definitely going to be getting that information. For the other projects, we didn't build those in. It was only in the sense of watching them in the museums. And we definitely are archiving them. Yeah.
Well, mostly speaking to Jeff's comments about what happens to the video when it's remixed or revised. And I think that's one of the concerns we have at public television of making our material out there in open access. Certainly we want it to be distributed and available, but the idea of downloading it and re-editing it, there are a lot of journalistic integrity issues there and information integrity issues. And I think that's a question that this group should really consider when you start asking for open access.
I saw one interesting provision from the BBC that I hadn't seen before just a couple of weeks ago, and it said that if you're going to remix their content, you can't use it to denigrate anyone, and you can't use it to promote anything. And that was another layer of restriction that I thought was really very interesting and likely to result in kind of a reduction of the trouble that the BBC might get in if their material were used in a way that was sort of antisocial or not in good faith. It's hard to legislate good faith. It's hard to write good faith into a legal contract. But I think that what you're being asked to do with this open content is to presume good faith on the part of the people that are going to reuse it. And that really is a leap of faith, and it's a problem because out of millions of people, there will be a few bad actors. So I don't know how you balance those social costs.
But what about the humor? I mean,
is that denigrating?
Is it denigrating? I mean, that whole notion of defining that line, because, I mean, parody is something that is a very long principle. I mean, the conception of postmodernism goes back to, in many ways, 18th century conceptions of parody, which were not necessarily denigrating something, but in a way, in the sense of imitating, you were comparing the two historical contexts. So when it's interesting, particularly that you started with Comedy Central, because, I mean, on the one hand, you could see that as well, in the sense that he was in this context of humor, and now, he's become a really a very, very important, news source. So it's changing, and I think that notion of the openness, somebody said earlier, one of the definitions of openness is also open to change, and the changing contextualization is important for that. So it's hard to say never, denigrate or promote. I would think.
I was just curious regarding the Berkeley Project, what you're doing, if anything, for archiving.
Well, that's a real problem because how would you archive it, right? I mean, what format? They're all compression schemes, and they're all awful in one way or another. And so we're doing, like, right now we're doing 3 courses that we're keeping the digital video tapes on, but it looks like it's going to cost us about $3,000 a course to do that. So we're not going to do that with everything. And already, the fact that we've been using reel for all these years, what a bunch of junk that really doesn't, you can't really put it into any of the contemporary good, better schemes because it's already ruined by being on reel. So, big problem right now.
There must be a foundation out there somewhere to support this.
Games and gaming coming up next. Please thank our panel.